A moving expression of an American ideal was inscribed on the base of the Statue of Liberty in 1903. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Thus ended the poem, The Sonnet, by Jewish poet Emma Lazarus. The door was open. The lamp of welcome was raised. And the Statue of Liberty, which was a symbol of the friendship between France and the US, also originally was meant to commemorate the end of slavery in America. However, it eventually over time came to represent the immigrant experience instead. Racism still existed, and Black people and women still could not vote. But despite a checkered past, America has always bestowed on immigrants life-changing benefits that are not so easily understood by the native-born. Setting foot on American soil, breathing air free from dictatorship and foreign oppression, gaining coveted citizenship. I was far too young at 11 days old to remember my family's flight to America, but that journey absolutely influenced everything that followed. We hoped that living in a free America would make a difference. So many of my programs here in the Granite State, here it is, the Statue of Liberty and the Sonnet. Many of my programs here in the Granite State are humanities events, but DOGE slashed funding in April of this year, and grants were completely cut. So this slide includes a donation QR code to New Hampshire Humanities in case you're feeling generous tonight. The organization will continue, that's the good news. However, it will take a lot more donations from donors in order to keep the organization afloat. Tonight, I'm glad to be here at my Exeter Speak Up's Toastmasters Club. And thank you to everyone attending and to EXTV, to Gabe, for doing the recording tonight. So next, I would like to ask a question. Do we have any immigrants in the audience? If so, please raise your hand. Tony, yes. Where are you from, Tony? Jamaica. All right. You still have family there? Okay. So we have 2 immigrants in this room, Tony and myself. Anybody have parents who immigrated to America? Gabe, where from?
Dominican Republic.
Dominican Republic. Thank you for that. Anyone else? How about grandparents? Oh, now we're getting, all right, Holly?
Italy.
Italy?
And Scotland.
And Scotland. Tamara?
Quebec.
Quebec. Scott?
Quebec and Poland.
And Poland. Okay, and Greg?
Quebec, Canada, and France.
And France, wow. We have a veritable United Nations in this room. That is wonderful. Thank you everyone for sharing that. Flight of Remembrance programs about my family during World War II in Europe have been provided since 2012. This new program tonight covers the post-war time in Germany, immigration to the US, and the early years in America, with 4 main objectives. First, to promote remembrance of post-war conditions that led to my family's immigration, to provide a unique perspective via their specific story of perseverance and dreams fulfilled, to set their situation within the broader context of events across Europe which still impact us today, the post-war humanitarian crisis, the Holocaust, the Nuremberg trials, German occupation zones, the onset of the Cold War, the Marshall Plan, and the daunting challenges facing people wishing to immigrate. Finally, the program reaffirms the value of love, dreams, and faith in God to aid survival and forge new beginnings. My family's story is a warning about dictatorship, but it is also a reminder of human resilience. In my wartime presentation, I recommend one of the most influential books of the 20th century, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I have a copy right here. This is actually the young adult version, but this is the version you want because it has pictures and the type is bigger. It is really an incredible book. Has anyone in this room read Man's Search for Meaning? John, you have. What did you think of it?
I thought it was inspirational and powerful.
Inspirational and powerful. My feeling exactly. So Viktor Frankl was a Jewish Holocaust survivor who, after the war, founded the third Viennese school of psychotherapy known as logotherapy. It helps people find meaning in life. So the reason I bring the book up again is because it is powerful. His words are as powerful and meaningful today as they were many, many decades ago. But also, the principles are universal, and anyone can use them. My parents and grandparents didn't know anything about Frankl, and yet there were things in their lives that lent meaning to their whole life experience. So first of all, their Catholic and Lutheran faith, their love for each other, and also their persistent vision of the future. Key family members had that, and they maintained it through all of the chaos and destruction that ensued. And they saw their unlikely dreams fulfilled beyond all expectation after the war ended. If you sign my email list, which I'm passing around, I will send you my World War II suggested reading and video list. You can unsubscribe at any time. If you don't, you'll be on my mailing list for a while, but feel free to unsubscribe if you would like to. Now, we don't necessarily need to know how our dreams will be fulfilled as long as they are three things. They need to be powerful, they need to be purposeful, and they need to be persistent. Those three things. How does that work? So let's start with a synopsis of the wartime story from the cover of my book. The guy with the helmet is my father, Rolf Dutzman, a Latvian aeronautical engineering student who fled Latvia with his family in late 1939 before the first Soviet takeover. The family was at great risk of execution or deportation under the Soviet regime. And they fled to Germany because Germany was the only country that would accept German refugees from anywhere else at the time. Now, to me, it is a monumental paradox which I have pondered for a decade and a half since I began writing my book, that the diabolical regime that masterminded the Holocaust and killed millions of people, 9 million roughly in the Holocaust, that at the same time, that was also the regime that saved the life of my family members who had nowhere else to go, as well as millions of other people of German descent from all across Europe. But it was out of the pan and into the cauldron. At age 22, my father Rolf was drafted into the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. It was one of his worst nightmares coming to pass. Homes on both sides of the family were destroyed. In the background of my cover, you see one of the ruined homes in Berlin. My parents, Rolf and Lilo, they met in 1940 Berlin and got married in 1944, also in Germany. After growing up in an unsettled household, my mother Lilo had a dream too. Her lifelong dream was for a harmonious marriage and family life, which was lacking during her growing up. My older brother Ingo, age 2, born in post-war Germany, and now flying in up top is a little airplane, which is an illustration I did from a photograph of my father Rolf flying a pre-World War II Latvian glider. That little icon represents my father's overarching goal for a career in aeronautical engineering. It was his dream, his passion, his single goal in life. There are two other key family members in the wartime story that I want to mention: my maternal grandmother Gertrude and my paternal grandfather Ernst. So Gertrude, shown here at left in 1903, the same year the inscription went on the Statue of Liberty, she was blessed with a beautiful soprano voice from a young age, and she trained to be an opera singer. But that dream was completely taken apart by World War I. It ended. And then, by the time, about 20 years after this photo of her was taken, her dream was once again set aside by the events of World War II. However, not extinguished. Her dream was threatened, but not extinguished. Rolf's father Ernst left in Latvian military uniform with his family in 1939. From boyhood, he had wanted to be captain of a ship bound for America, but immigration opportunities did not materialize before, or during, and right after the wars. After fleeing Latvia, Ernst was drafted into the German army, and due to his advanced technical skills, he was sent to work under Werner von Braun, the rocket expert, for V-2 rocket inspection. Who has heard of Werner von Braun? Okay, quite a number of you have. You know, he was brought to the US. You'll hear about that a little bit later. For the last 14 months of the war, Ernst served as chief inspector of the V-2 at a top secret underground installation in the heart of Germany. Now, at the end of the war, both Rolf and Ernst were held in prisoner of war camps. Now I want to mention a fact that comes as a surprise to many American audiences, and that is that no one in my extended family joined the Nazi Party or supported Hitler. My parents affirmed that all along, that no one joined the party, no one supported Hitler, but I actually was able to confirm this a number of years ago via an online database listing Nazi Party members, a German database. Whether Nazi, fascist, communist, Marxist, or a whole new American brand, new but not so different, dictatorship often leads to catastrophe. In 1939, it led to a war that reduced much of Europe, especially Germany, to a humanitarian disaster site. 14.5 million homes in Germany had been destroyed, millions of people internally displaced. In addition, globally, anyone know how many people died globally? 50 to 70 million people across the globe died during the war, including 9 million Holocaust victims. Afterwards, devastated German cities and countryside were overrun by 11 to 14 million homeless, hungry, destitute refugees and displaced persons. They came from concentration, slave labor, and POW camps, as well as from surrounding countries where people of German descent faced retribution, murder, and expulsion after the war. Millions languished in displaced persons camps long after VE Day and long after fleeing Soviet takeover. So one man's quest for unbridled power led to untold human suffering. Like the people in this photo from German archives, Lilo and Gertrude, Lilo my mother, Gertrude my grandmother, fled on foot to escape the encroaching Soviet troops. 120 miles westward across mountainous terrain with only what they could hand carry. Now I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. You'll have to read in my book, if you decide you ever want to buy it, about how Rolf and Lila were miraculously reunited after the war, largely thanks to the dedicated efforts of my grandmother Gertrude, who was a major mover and shaker in this family story. And also, you can read about how Lilo, my mother, orchestrated Rolf's escape from prisoner of war camp. Pretty dramatic story. In 1945, there was no EU to coordinate relief and resettlement as there is today for Ukrainians, and the two United Nations agencies created were not up to the task. Nearly 2 years after VE Day, Winston Churchill still described Europe as a rubble heap, a charnel house, a breeding ground of pestilence and hate. But under US leadership, under the Truman presidency, the Marshall Plan began rebuilding the broken economies of Europe and also promoting democracy in order to prevent further Soviet takeover. Now a bit of geography. Post-war Germany was divided up into 4 occupation zones. Does anyone know what they were? You might recognize them by the flags. Anybody yell it out if you can. 4 occupation zones, 4 Allied powers. Anybody? Okay. France?
UK.
Yes. France, England, the US. Here we go. British, Soviet, American, and French. Rolf was in a POW camp in the American zone, which was later turned over to the French, but when he escaped, he headed northward into the British zone, where part of the family had sought refuge. My grandfather Ernst, on the other hand, was held in an American camp in France itself, but after the war, he obtained a job at a company in Bavaria, which was in the American zone. And as for Lilo's family, her entire family, except for my grandmother Gertrude, her mother, all of them, including her father, remained trapped in the Soviet zone, which later became East Germany, and she never saw any of them again. So they were near Berlin. There it is flying in, and you notice Berlin is completely enclosed by the Soviet zone and is itself divided up into 4 occupation zones. By 1946, many European countries were trapped behind the Iron Curtain, a term popularized by Winston Churchill. This map shows in red the countries, including East Germany, that remained part of the Soviet-controlled Eastern Bloc after the war. Many Europeans, including my family members, feared further Soviet takeover. And the peril resurfaced in 2022, more than 30 years after the Cold War ended, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Fortunately, NATO is now an important and essential safeguard for most of Europe, and the EU is providing most of the aid and resettlement, not the US. As discussed at greater length in my wartime presentation, it was during the immediate post-war time that most of my family members, including my parents, became aware of the Holocaust. And this was true for many other people in Germany as well. True, there were people who knew everything, people in certain industries, higher echelons of government and military, and so on. So to be clear, everybody knew that concentration camps existed in Germany, but they didn't necessarily know who and how many people were sent there, or what the treatment was like after they arrived there. As in Russia today, and even increasingly here in the US, the Nazi regime dismantled the independent press and media. It controlled all media and churned out propaganda to keep many citizens in the dark, until finally post-war publications and news reports divulged the hideous truth. Jewish Holocaust survivor Marian Tursky, who was an articulate Polish historian and journalist, said, "Evil comes step by step. The Holocaust didn't fall from the sky all of a sudden, but took hold gradually as public acceptance of small acts of discrimination eventually led to ghettos and extermination camps. Once creeping authoritarianism escalates to an all-out grasp for power, representative government is quickly lost, and human rights can be abolished just as quickly." The full truth of complicity and awareness will never be known, but I welcome discussion always on this topic. This public domain image by an unknown artist articulates what words fail to convey. It's composed of thousands of names of Holocaust victims from the Yad Vashem database in Israel. The Nuremberg trials against Nazi leaders took place between 45 and 49 in a series of 13 trials carried out in Germany by judges from the 4 Allied powers, including the Soviet Union. The charges consisted of crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, including in the Holocaust. 199 defendants, 161 convictions, 37 sentences to death. The Nuremberg trials were a remarkable international achievement and an important precedent for future cases. Back to the family. My older brother Ingo was born into post-war privation in January of 1947. Rolf and Lilo called the years from 45 to 47 the hunger years. And the winter of 46 to 47, the winter when Ingo was born, was one of the coldest on record. It's still commonly called the hunger winter. Lack of food, housing, and fuel caused great suffering across all of Europe, and millions of German civilians and POWs died of hunger, disease, cold, and mass murder. From Rolf's mother Maria, though, they received cartons of cigarettes obtained from American officers in exchange for her beautiful needlework. I debated whether to bring the beautiful embroidered dress from Latvia, which I showed during my wartime programs. She did museum quality work, and indeed, I want to donate that dress someday to a museum. Since no one in the family smoked, they took the cartons of cigarettes to farms and bartered for food. By the time Ingo could eat solid food, Rolf and Lilo were giving up a lot of their food to feed him. They were fortunate to find a small flat with a shared bath, but no other comforts. After Ingo came down with frostbite in the freezing apartment that winter, Lilo decided to join a group of people stealing coal from a train. She was arrested, fined, released. She often said afterwards, we ate and did things after the war that under normal circumstances we would never even consider eating or doing. Still, Rolf and Lilo were grateful that they were together, they were alive, and they had a roof over their heads. Cold, starvation, and lack of housing were not the only problems facing Germany after the war. Currency reform also loomed. To receive aid under the Marshall Plan, occupation zones had to completely eliminate all old currency, which would wipe out the remaining savings of millions of German people, including my family members. Worse yet, aeronautical engineering was banned, so Rolf's career prospects looked grim indeed. He had previously received his aeronautical engineering master's degree from a combination of a university in Latvia and a university not in Germany proper, but outside of Germany proper. Now, he decided to prepay his studies for an automotive master's degree as well. It was a wise investment in the future. Meanwhile, Rolf's father Ernst, my grandfather, always the innovator, had a brilliant idea. He set to work on a huge wooden crate originally used to transport a bulldozer from America in order to help rebuild Europe. From it, he built a tiny 3-room cottage in a country setting in Bavaria. It featured beds and seating built directly into the walls to save space. From a second crate, he added a porch. He was decades ahead of the tiny house movement, and copycat crate houses soon began appearing in the area. Under President Truman, the Displaced Persons Act of 1948 enabled 400,000 displaced persons to immigrate to the United States outside of immigration quotas. And among those people, That included native Latvians like Rolf's father Ernst and his sister Ruth. But Ernst's status as a former German officer delayed his immigration. He had landed a job, though, with a precision engineering firm in Bavaria, and his hope was, his immediate dream was, to help other family members strike out for freedom and a better life. Mail correspondence with Werner von Braun, the rocket expert, helped keep Ernst's dream of immigration alive. So they were conversant. They sent letters. We still have some of those in our possession. Von Braun and more than 1,600 German V-2 rocket scientists and engineers were moved to the US after the war in a rather secret and rather controversial top secret program by the US government to recruit German scientists for post-war initiatives, including the US space program. A lot of people in this country did not know about this at all at this point in time. Von Braun occasionally sent American technical magazines to Ernst, who passed them on to Rolf. They saw ads for beginning engineers with starting salaries of $500 per month. It was a rate of pay unheard of in post-war Germany. When Rolf obtained a job at the same precision engineering firm as Ernst, what do you think happened? Do you think they moved into the crate house with my grandfather, my grandmother, and my aunt? Do you think they camped out in a tent somewhere? Do you think they lived on the street? Or do you think they found another apartment? Who thinks they moved into the crate house? John, Holly, Tamra, and Greg, you folks are with it. You are really sharp? Yes. Now, can you imagine 6 people in a house with 3 rooms? I think there was a storage space. That might have helped. So during that time, 6 people in a tiny 3-room cottage, close quarters, led to many conversations where my grandfather Ernst, remember his dream, he wanted to be captain of a ship bound for America all his life. He convinced them they should immigrate to America. But for Rolf and Lilo, there was a problem. Would their unlikely, persistent immigration dream come to pass? Find out next time in the second half of Flight of Remembrance, Part 2. Thank you.